Right, let's bring in an investment banker and development economist. He's Dr. Naemeka Obiareri. I hope I got that correctly. He's joining us in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So this particular issue seemed like a very contentious one as at last year. It was one of the biggest things that Nigerians were talking about for months. NGF, especially the Northern Governors Forum, were against it. The president, in his media chat did say, look, there was no going back. But all of a sudden was saying that there is a turnaround and agreement has been reached. What do you make of it?
For me, the tax reform bill by the Taiwo Oyelede Committee is one of the most watershed programs and legislative piece since the advent of this republic. And for the governors, I think they should look, it's good that they've concurred that it should go through. But the sharing formula is something we must consider. Derivatives should be 50%, not population, not any other consideration. And I think the president, in his wisdom, and the team actually wanted derivative to be 50%, and that's how it should be. And if we look back to history, the golden era of Nigeria was between 1960 to 1966. In fact, I was privileged to look through the revenue formula and revenue generation in 1964. And I discovered that at that time, the federal government had about 153 million pounds as revenue. The regions, I think the South, the old Eastern region generated about 10 million pounds. The old Western region about 7.2 million pounds, and then the Midwest 2.9 million pounds. You could see that each of the regions were very, very productive. They were contributing to the center, not the other way around. And that time we had a fiscal regime, a fiscal program that allowed the constituent units to control 50% of whatever they produced, pay 30 to the central port, the equality, and then 20 to the federal government. And the exclusive list then was limited to external relationship and external security. And there was incentive for everybody to go look inward and produce. And if you look at the revenue stream then, the North had the granite pyramid, had the textile, had the cotton, that was booming. In Kano then, the granite pyramid was like towers. In the West, we had the old West region had cocoa and the cocoa byproduct. In fact, the tallest building in Ibadan that still stands today was built by Obafemi Awolowo. We had free education in the West. About 430,000 people were on scholarship, fully paid scholarship. In the old Eastern Nigeria, we had a very, very ebullient medical doctor, Michael Lobara, who became premier at 39. In 6 years, he built the fastest growing economy in the whole of the Commonwealth, 9.5% GDP growth, consistently. And he did over 214-kilometer industrial belts, agro-based. We had the coal that was coming from there. We had the palm oil and a lot of things. And, it beggars believe that the governors are fixated at just getting the trickles from Niger Delta. If somebody says, okay, I want derivatives to be 50% or to attach more in population, population is actually an advantage for people who are very productive. Look at China, 1.4 billion people. See what they are doing. Look at India. In fact, Nigeria is the only hugely populated country that is not pulling its weight because of the fiscal regime. So the Tinubu regime, government, in the right, this tax policy is something I will advise the governors. They shouldn't stick on this derivative of 30%. They should move it all the hawk to 50%.
Do you think that perhaps, what you were, speaking to earlier in terms of the regional government that we had then and how productive every region was what the president was trying to do by putting derivation at 50%, where to force, the governors to go back to their state and think of IGR?
Exactly. I've heard this argument. People say, Lagos is standing at advantage because Lagos has seaport, Lagos has a port, and Lagos has everything. And they cited the fact that there is a deep seaport coming up, another one coming up in Badagry. Now, I expect these governors, they have governors forum that is very, very powerful. I come from the Southeast. And the Southeast is one region. Remember that the old Eastern region was the fastest growing in the Commonwealth. And the whole things that made it there are still there. I was looking through the gas reserve of Nigeria. Nigeria has a gas reserve of over $1.4 trillion. Untapped. And most of this gas reserve sits in the southeast of Nigeria. Nigeria today has a coal reserve proven of over $302 billion. And most of these coal reserves are in the east and the Kogi axis. I expect the Governors Forum, Southeast Governors Forum. The National Assembly had amended the Constitution in such a way that things like rail is now on the concurrent list. If Akwa Ibom is doing deep sea port, Lagos is doing, what stopped the Southeast Governors Forum coming together? The other day, the governor of Imo State said he wanted to dredge to Orashi, which is good. You can do a mini seaport. If you think the advantage Lagos has that they have a seaport, you can sit down with the president and those in charge. What do we do to make One or Calabar Port or Akwa Ibom Port to be as competitive as Lagos? What do we put together to make sure that we dredge from the Atlantic into Orashi? It will take about $150 million to do that.
Or even push
I'm just, even if you want to,
our mining resources to be taken off the exclusive list.
I am coming. Exactly, you push for it. Do you know that if the Southeast governors today now, if you clear a container in Lagos to take it to the Southeast, it's about 6 million naira on the road. If these governors are truly altruistic, if these governors are creative and thinking like the likes of Jokonde, Simon Bakwe, and Michael Obama, what they should be pushing under the aegis of the Southeast Governors Forum or Southeast Development Commission, set up an SPV. Each of them will take 5%. Get a private sector investor. In fact, interestingly, one of the biggest dredgers in Nigeria are owned by an Igbo man, Nest Oil. He bought the Globeja dredgers. They can go into a private-public partnership arrangement, dredge into Orashi, get the licenses, do a deep sea, a seaport, even if it's a mini port, so that vessels can come into the Southeast. And which is something they should be thinking. On the issue of rail, the most lucrative rail route in Nigeria is the Lagos, Shagamu, Ore, Ijebode, Asaba, Benin, Onitsha, Owerri, Port Harcourt, Seko Bakaba, Umuahia, Okigwe, Enugu, back to Abakaliki and Afibo. Then it's 817-kilometer corridor that will take $5.2 billion to do. $1.3 billion equity contribution and the rest 25-year debt funding. If the Southeast governors today decide to work with the Southwest governors and the South-South governors, 11 states, they can set up an SPV. In 5 years, we will do that corridor. It's a corridor that has 200 million ton cargo traffic every year. It's a corridor that has 300 to 500 million passenger traffic every year. It's a corridor that can pay back investors in 7 years, under a DBOT for 45 years. You sit down with the president and negotiate and discuss this. But interestingly, we are so saddled, unfortunately, with those that are the constituent units, who unfortunately control 40% of resources, who are not thinking internally. The coal resources in the Southeast, the gas in the Southeast, if we have governors who are thinking, they have governors forum, they can sit down with knowledgeable private sector players. How do we tap into this latter? Let me tell you something. VAT is actually a derivative of consumption. If you create an enabling environment for companies to establish in your area, for business to come to your area, you will generate a lot of VAT, and then you will share better. But the problem we have is that these governors are only thinking about what they can get from Nigeria.
Whether it is a derivative of consumption or whether it's a derivative of production, some states will still suffer. They don't have the numbers in terms of population. They don't have industries. They've not, invested in terms of industries or creating the enabling environment for industries to come in. And so, however we decide to generate that, some states are going to suffer, and that's where the challenge is, and that's why you see them almost as though they are fighting to say, look, this is how we should share it. This is how we should. And I wanted to ask you, because for those who do not understand what this means, because there are Nigerians who basically do not understand what all of this means, whether we are doing equality 50%, what that means, derivation 30%, what that means, and population 20%. They are confused as to what it means. Just break it down for us.
Okay, good. Derivative is supposed to be where those things are consumed, where the economic activities took place. That is where you get 50%. Equality just simply means the same sharing formula, put it in a basket, and then use the same demography, and then population. Oh, I am 40. And of course, there's still doubt about population of Nigeria based on 2006 census. Let us not deceive ourselves. Nigeria is the only place in the whole wide world where those that live in the desert claim to be more populated than those that live in the coastal areas. Go and check anywhere in the whole world. Now, let us even leave that. It beggars belief. It saddens me when we say there is no state in that some states are suffering. They are suffering because they deliberately want to suffer. There is no state in Nigeria today that cannot generate $10 billion revenue annually within its domain if the governors are able to look inward. I'll give you an example. Netherlands, 41,000 square kilometer landmass. Netherlands has an arable landmass of 1.9 million hectares. In fact, Netherlands had to build 1,400 kilometer shoreline embankment to protect themselves from being carried by erosion because they are under sea level. 18 million people. Netherlands generates and exports 124 billion euro agro exports annually. They generate over 648 billion euros annually. Niger State is 2 times bigger than Netherlands. In fact, most states in Nigeria are bigger than Netherlands. All we just need to do, agro-technology is the lowest hanging fruit. You can create, say, I'll give you an example now. In the north of Nigeria, we've done the numbers. I have a team that look at the economy and dissect it. If we decide today, the governors of the North, 19 North States decide today to work with the presidency to set up 2,500 agro-industrial clusters, agro-pastoral scheme, just like we have it. I'll give you an example. In Netherlands, annually, they generate about 24 billion euros from the dairy value chain. 1.6 million cows in 18,000 dairy centers co-pastoring with agriculturists. They produce 800,000 tons of cheese and 12 billion liters of milk. 24 billion euros. The arrangement we have in the north, 2,500 agro clusters. Each of them will take about $6 million to do. Each of them will create 5,000 jobs. Each of them will generate $49 million annually. We will have $109 billion annually from that place into the next 40 years. Imagine if $109 billion is coming from that area, the kind of VAT revenue that they will generate from that area. They are not thinking about. In the southeast,
have a situation where, where we produce and where we process are 2 different states. So production comes from one state and processing, goes to another state.
You can actually create enabling environment for everything to happen within your domain. You can actually. It's about creating. Okay, I'll give you an example now. I saw the other day on video, he's by destroying trucks laden with beverages, enforcing. I have been privileged to travel around the world. In the United Arab Emirates, that is 100% Islamic. They have areas where, in fact, there was a day I entered one of my hotel rooms. I opened the fridge. I saw a tot of alcohol. They say $70. One of the ways they prevent people from drinking is that they put a lot of taxations on those beverages to discourage people. But if you think you want to drink, you have to pay for it. But in Nigeria, the same people will break the bottles. Then the beverages will be consumed in Lagos State, will be consumed in Imo State. And somebody will sit after destroying the means of livelihood. He now want to control 15% of the VAT coming from Lagos and Owerri. Does it make sense? So we must build an economy that is very, very competitive. Today, why is it that in the Middle East, they are allowing these things? If you look at the structure of the UAE, there are 7 Emirates coming together to unite to form one country. And they have different laws, they have different dynamics. Other Emirates are opening up like Dubai, because Dubai went ahead of everybody because of the lax regime in that area. And that is what it means to be very, very competitive. If we decide to put in place the right constitutional and fiscal framework, just like we had between 1960 to 1996, I bet you in 10 years, Mr. President has always announced that he wants to build a $1 trillion economy. If we put in place the same fiscal and constitutional regime that we had between 1960 to 1960, I bet you in 12 years, we will build a $2 trillion economy. Why? Because the governors will now look inward. It is not a case of monkey the work, baboon the chop. Everybody will now look, what do I do in my own state to generate revenue? In Imo State, where I come from, we've done the numbers. We can easily generate nothing less than 2 trillion naira from Imo State every year. The Southeast can generate between $20 to $100 billion annually across the value chain. The Southwest can generate nothing less than $61 to $90 billion internally if the governors look inward. But unfortunately, everybody is fixated with Abuja. And Mr. President and his team, all I expected governors, okay, Mr. President, since you have begun to adjust the fiscal revenue sharing formula on the tax side, can we extend it to other products, oil and gas, gold, silver, agri products? And when you do it to coal, and then they can ask Mr. President, can we now reduce some of this on the exclusive list? Let mining go into the concurrent list and all those stuff. That is what we expect proactive thinking governors to be doing. But sitting down in Abuja to say, okay, Taiwo, let us reduce to 30%. It is not moving. They are not moving this country forward. And I will encourage Mr. President to stand firm. In fact, Mr. President has always been an advocate of sovereign national conference. He has always been an advocate of fiscal federalism. He should go all the hog. If that is the only thing he achieves in the regime, trying to restructure the fiscal regime of Nigeria, history will be kind to him.
So one of the things that was also said, of course, the issue of VAT should not be increased. They've also talked about the idea of no reduction in the income, company income tax. Are we also missing out? Because again, on one hand, you're saying don't increase VAT, which is good, but don't reduce company income tax, because it would seem as though the governors were thinking based on what they would get and not how that would trickle down and impact on job numbers, for example, because these are the businesses that employ. And if you at least reduce tax for them, you create room for them to invest in other areas. I mean, were we thinking, or were they thinking in that regard when they were saying the reduction in?
They are not. The problem we have is that we are short of thinkers and proactive developers in the mood of those we had in the First Republic. I'm sorry to say it. They are thinking about. I'll give an example. In 2002, Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the whole world, paid a whooping tax of $11 billion to the U.S. federal account. $11 billion. Most corporations are leaving Nigeria, PZ and all of them. They are leaving because the environment is not conducive. There is insecurity, there's multiple tax regime, and which is what Mr. President is trying to reduce. I'll give an example. PZ made a huge loss in Nigeria in 2023. But if you look at their operation they actually made the highest profit after tax based on operation of 38% compared to their operation in other parts of the world. But they lost out because of FX devaluation and FX-related losses. All I expected the governors to sit down. And I said, when we talk about insecurity too, everybody begins to look at the center. As a governor of a state without Abuja, I will not share an inch of my state with any hoodlum or bandit. The governor of Zamfara State even stated that they know where the bandits are. The people know who the bandits are. They are not unknown. And he said, with the right political will, we can destroy them in 2 weeks. We expect the Northwestern Governors Forum to sit down with Mr. President. This is what we want to do, to ensure that there is no banditry, there is no ISWAP, there is no local wara in the whole of the Northwest. I expect the Southeast Governors Forum to sit down with Mr. President. We want this, we want this, we want this to destroy insecurity. And I'll give you an example. If today we want to destroy insecurity in the Southeast, all we just need to do, if we decide to be very transparent, security is indigenous. Let me tell you, every community knows the good, the bad and ugly. And the good are being hindered because the very minority evil people have AK-47 and means of oppression, which is unlawful terror. If we decide today to do what is right, go back to the 1, 2, 4, 6 electoral wards in the Southeast. Ask the leaders, the clergy, give us 100 of your sons who you can trust. Bring them under what we call agro rangers. Do clusters of 1,000 hectares in every ward. Get the federal government to support you. Set up a security trust fund of 120, 150 billion naira. We will fund it in 24 hours in our labor. We have people that can fund it. And if you bring the 100 people, train them under it will be tripartite supervision, the National Security Advisor, the governors, and whoever that will head in every state. Equip them with AK-47, just like we have the civilian task force in the north. Getting us in to give us 3 armored personnel carriers in every local government areas. When you take 1,000 hectares of land from every of the 1,246 electoral wards, you will have reduced any place where the bandits will hide. Give them concussion drugs and allow the people to go to their forest and fish out the kidnappers and the hoodlums. When you have these people being paid well and you have agro parks that can create between 10, 15 billion naira every year in every of these electoral wars, there is job and everything. Insecurity will be a thing of the past. Unknown government will be a thing of the past. Sit at home on Monday will be a thing of the past. But these governors are not after all these things. If you ask them, they will tell you, oh, the federal government controls the army, the federal government controls the military, the federal government controls the police. But we know that security is beyond kinetic. It's winning the trust of the people, working with the people, and using the people, the good people, to flush out the very minor bad people that are creating problems for us. And when you have the conducive environment for 24/7 economy to grow, Nigeria will blossom. So I expect every one of them to sit down. Leadership is all about protection of life and property. That is number one obligation of every leader. But these guys do not see. If we have compassionate, empathetic, honest leaders in the mood of Jokonde, in the mood of Michael Okpara, in the mood of Simon Bakwe, in the mood of Obasanjo Olowo, in today's Fourth Republic, Nigeria will be fixed in less than 1 year. But the problem is that all they are thinking is about, oh, how do we get FAC? How do we get Jack? How do we share it? And how do we loot it? I'm sorry to use the word. And that is what we're experiencing over the last 25 years.
All right, so one of the things that people have said is that, which you also mentioned, is the harmonization of the tax regime, where, I mean, this presidency is saying we do not want the multiple taxation, which has actually hindered investment. Are we likely to see more investment, whether local or foreign now that we have, it's not been passed, but once it's passed, more investments into the country?
Let me tell you, one of the reasons why I love this tax policy is to try to remove most of the multiple tax regimes. I'll give you an example. I chair a group that has a rice mill in Baraba. We loaded a truck of rice from Abuja to drop in Owerri. The truck traveled all the way from Abuja, crossing different states. Immediately it entered in Soka. That when we started seeing all manner of checkpoints, both uniformed and ununiformed. Between Nsukka to Owerri, we spent 545,000 naira to all manner of tax force. And we even lost some bag of rice because they carry some of them. And interestingly, some of these people are working, purport to be working for local government and the states. And interestingly, most of these funds are not going to the accounts of the state because they have POS people who they will use to collect money from you, unaccounted for. Pure extortion. But under the, imagine, okay, I have produced the rice at a price. With this cost, of course, will go to consumers. I will have to add this cost to consumers. But under the new tax regime, it is uniformed. This kind of madness and criminality will not be on the road. And see, this issue of don't reduce corporate tax, go and check economies where they have huge corporate tax. What is it? Go to South Africa. I looked at South Africa revenue in 2022. $126 billion. $81 billion came from way of corporate tax and the individual tax. 31% of tax, South Africa has a 31% tax, 25 to 31% tax to GDP revenue ratio. In Nigeria, it's a different ballgame altogether. We don't even have people paying tax in this country. And that's the truth. There are some part of Nigeria that does not pay tax. And we know it. And they will not pay tax until the right regimes are put in place. If you look at most of the tax, look, why do you think Lagos is blossoming? Why do you think Delta State is blossoming? Why do you think River State, Ogun State has more tax revenue than other states? My Imo State is one of the poorest states in terms of IGR. But I can tell that if we put the right fiscal incentives in place, Imo State can generate as much tax, even more than Ogun State.
We need to go on break. We'll continue a very interesting conversation. We'll continue in just a moment. Let's take a break now. Standpoint will be back in a moment. Stay with us.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did they say?
News. First, with breaking news.
No buy am. But why? No see say this big bull bag of rice no get the new big bull holographic seal. Not true.
Introducing the Big Bull Holographic Seal Tape, your favorite authentic Big Bull rice, 50 kg and 25 kg. Now with holographic seal tape. This is to ensure you get the premium product from Big Bull Rice. Do not buy if the holographic seal tape is not on the bag or is broken. Big Bull Rice. Tasty rice nourished you.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Standpoint. We've been talking about the new agreement reached by the Nigerian Governors Forum with the Tax Reform Committee and what all of that will mean for the country at different levels, at the state level, at the national level, even the local government level. We've been speaking with investment banker and economist, Dr. Onaemeka Obiariri. Thank you so much for staying with us. You were speaking earlier to whether this will bring in investment into the country, especially foreign direct investment, when people can project that, look, this is all I will have to pay, whether it's duty levy, taxation, if I'm going to invest in this country, this is what it will cost me. Does that mean then that we can, because that's been the drive of the president, he's been traveling around the world to ensure that businesses and foreign direct investment come in. Would this become, create an enabling environment for them to come in?
Yes, it will. It will. One of the, for any investor to come into an economy, there are factors to consider. First of all, you need to look at the forex and price stability. You look at the level of inflation. Look at cost of fund. Look at insecurity. Look at taxation. Why do you think that Donald Trump is fixated in reducing taxes for big corporate organizations? Because they are the ones who actually drive and create wealth. When there is less taxes to be paid, companies have more money to deploy into productive activities, into innovation. and more jobs are created, more values are added to the economy. If there is security, I'll give you an example. Gino Food, one of the biggest food companies in the whole world, came into Kebbi State. They wanted to do Gino Food, the whole value chain, tomato puree. They got 5,000 farmers to do 5,000 hectares, backward integrated tomato farm. They set up massive factory. One night, bandits invaded their center to kidnap their expatriates. They evacuated. I don't know if they've gone back. Those are the kind of things that we experience in Nigeria. Look at the southeast of Nigeria. I'll give you an example. In 2018, Nigeria signed a contract with Nike to sponsor this to the NFA, our national team. Nike paid us $3 million. One day after the World Cup opened, Nike made almost about $240 million from sale of Nigerian apparel. Nike, Puma, Adidas, between them have turnover over $60 billion. They don't own any factory of their own. Most of their production are done under contract franchising. Most of the companies producing those things for them are in Bangladesh, are in Indonesia, are in China, are in Vietnam. Nigeria has some of the best tailors, some of the best apparel producers in Aba and Onitsha and Kano. A thinking governors forum, those of the Southeast, should think about how do we create competitive agro-producing clusters so that Nike, Adidas, and Puma can actually be producing their apparel in Nigeria so that we can eat into the $60 billion turnover annually. We can at least produce $5 billion worth of those products. Under George Bush and Bill Clinton, they developed the African Growth Opportunity Act to allow Africans export into America tariff-free. America imports $120 billion worth of apparels and shoes every year. None comes from Nigeria. Rather, we are importing things from Pakistan. A thinking government should be, how do we empower those within those sectors to ensure that we'll export into the US? Today, a bag of rice is selling for almost about 100,000 naira per 50 kg. I have a rice mill. To produce a 50 kg bag of rice from the farm gate to the milling plant takes nothing less than 58,000 naira per 50 kg bag. But what brings the cost to 100,000 are all the criminal tax levies, all the extortions on the road from the production point to the place where it is sold. And then, of course, greedy middlemen. So we should be asking ourselves these questions. If we put the right incentives in place, if I'm a governor, what I should be thinking is, how do I make my state more competitive? I drove into Eko Atlantic. It was done under a PPP framework. There is no state in Nigeria that cannot develop its own tourist heaven. If we have Banana Island in Lagos, how come somebody is not doing Plantain Island in Onitsha, between Asaba and Onitsha, where you have a riverway? How come? People should be thinking, how come somebody is not doing Uguta Wonderland, where you have Uguta Lake? So these people are not thinking, and that's the truth. You see this country, there is no country blessed like Nigeria. I was thinking, I was in Kigali for 15 days. For the 15 days that I was in Kigali, I didn't see any pothole. The light did not blink one minute. Kigali does not have the kind of river tributaries we have in Nigeria. Kigali is landlocked, 26,000 square kilometers, smaller than the southeast. Kigali does not have gas reserve, yet they have uninterrupted power supply. Nigeria with $1.4 trillion gas reserve, $202 billion coal reserve, does not have 24/7 power supply. Now they've diversified power. What are the governors doing to create eco-captive power systems to drive industrial revolutions in their state? If Michael Okpara in 1960s could do 214-kilometer industrial belt, agro-industrial belt, in 6 years, how come the governors with bigger resources are not doing 100-kilometer industrial belt in 8 years? It's a question we should be asking ourselves. I think we owe ourselves that duty in this generation, not to allow the next generation to experience what we're experiencing. And that we must keep on profiling solutions, pushing our solution, and pleading with Mr. President. If the only thing he will achieve in his first 2 terms, or first term or 2 terms, is to totally restructure Nigerian physical constitutional framework back to the 1960s framework, history will be very, very kind to him. Because that is the only thing.
Drive productivity and production, because people have always said our biggest challenge as a country is that we're a consumer nation and that we do not produce as much as we should, and so we end up exporting, or rather importing much more than, things that we can easily even produce here. Is what you just analyzed, is that what would drive productivity and production?
That is not even the argument. The argument is, what are you consuming? Singapore, as small as Alimosho, 712 miles, square miles land size, 5.16 million people, import over $600 billion worth of commodities and services and goods. They even import sand to be able to do shoreline embankment to protect themselves. The question is, what are you importing? I give you an example today. Do you know that it will shock you that despite the fact that we have 64 million arable land mass in Nigeria, our tractor population is less than 45,000 tractors. In areas like Netherlands, like Slovenia, they have tractor population of at least 1,200 tractors per 100 square kilometers. If Nigeria should have enough tractor population to sweat our land mass, we must have at least 800,000 tractors. What are we doing? If we're importing tractors, if we're importing agro-technology to be like Netherlands, nobody will question us. The question is, we are importing junks. And I will also advise, even in the tax regime, we should start taxing luxury. Most Nigerians do not pay tax. You see somebody who is driving a Ferrari worth $2 million. Go to tax office and check how much he's paying. In Malaysia, if you're driving big cars, you pay almost 300% tax on the value of those cars. That is why if you go to Malaysia, those who drive big cars pay big tax. That is why it encourages them to patronize their locally produced vehicles. If we decide today to introduce luxury taxes in Nigeria, tax your bling bling, tax your luxury cars, tax your luxury mansions, tax your luxury lifestyle, people will channel their funds into productive purposes. Because one of the things that pushes most of this ostentatious living is because the funds are not properly generated. Have you seen Elon Musk? Have you seen Elon Musk, the way he dresses? One of the richest men in the whole world, Warren Buffett, still lives in a 4-bedroom bungalow he built in Omaha. Still drives his own Buick car. He invests heavily. He's worth over $100 billion. But in Nigeria, you see people who are not even worth up to $1 billion living larger than life because they are not paying taxes. They are not doing what they are supposed to. They are not engaged in any productive activities. We must get to a point where we build an economy where people are productive, where honest, productive works are rewarded. Tax incentives and tax breaks should be given to those who are into production, who are into honest economic activities. And we must look at, and the only way we can build this economy is for us to go back to that 1963, 1960 constitutional and physical framework. Bring out that constitution, dust it, change the regions from 4 to 6, adopt the same physical framework. I tell you the truth, when people know there is no longer free lunch in China, they will sit down and work. But as long as we run an economy that is not merit-based, an economy that does not honor honest enterprise and effectiveness, an economy that rewards criminality and take and grab and run, we will never make progress in this country.
And is that what is also driving us to borrow? Because we seem to be borrowing, whether at state level or national level. You realize that sometimes when the state debt is so high, you're wondering, and people say, look, and this is where the problem is. When it is not, the development in that state is not commensurate with, and that's why some people will say they won't pay tax. It's not excusable, but some people will say, look, I won't pay because the development is not even commensurate with, the amounts we're given. And so why should we continue to pay when we're not seeing what the money is also being used for? I mean, that accountability conversation also needs to be had.
See, borrowing is not a problem. Borrowing, in fact, leverage financing is actually the cheapest source of financing for funding development. But the question is, what are you borrowing to fund? I took our time to look at our development plans over the last 25 years. In 2007 to 2008, Nigeria had a global infrastructure development master plan that indicated clearly that for us to build our economy from the current fourth world economy level to second world, we must have consistent investment of $100 billion, sustainable over the next 30 years, $3 trillion investments. We had the economic recovery growth plan between 2017 and 2020 that would not even achieve 1%. Then we have the national development plan, 2021, 2025. In fact, in that national development plan, it was envisaged that we'll be able to generate capital investment of $839 billion, over 80% of it from the private sector. We even envisaged that we're going to have budget surplus in 2025. Look at the current budget proposal. It already has a deficit of 13 trillion. I give you an example. I'll give you an example. If we decide today, I challenge the northern governors, I challenge the southeastern governors, I challenge the southeastern, we will give them pro bono advice, structure it for them how they can do this. If the governors of the north decide today to borrow 15 billion, they go to Akinwumi Adesina and Yemi Kadus and say, I give you this structure. We want to do 2,500 agro-industrial clusters, 1,000 hectares each, and they have the land mass, 64 million arable land mass. This will give us 125,000 agro rangers that we can use to destroy insecurity in 1 year. Each cluster will give you, we've done the BOQ, we've done the business plan, we've done the numbers. Every year, they will make $42 million from each clusters. 5,000 to 10,000 jobs from each clusters. $109 billion revenue. In the Southeast, we have a proposal that can make them generate between 20 to 100 billion annually. In the Southwest, $61 to $90 billion annually. In every state in Nigeria, sector by sector, services, production, what they can do. But the problem, and they will borrow to do it. Okay, if we are borrowing to invest, I'll give an example now, the rail route I mentioned to you. That rail route, Lagos, Ijebu-Ode, Shagamu, 817 kilometers that crosses southeast, southwest, south, is $5.2 billion to do it. $1.32 billion equity funding, $4 billion 25-year debt funding. We can easily raise the money. Under a DBOT arrangement, 45 years, payback in 7 years. It will catalyze development across the whole areas it will pass through. The numbers are there. If you are borrowing in such a very transparent manner, you are borrowing $4 billion that will be repaid in 7 years. It is there. If you are borrowing to fund agro-industrial park that can repay in 2 years, the numbers are there. The other day, it was said that, AFDB is giving them about 7 states, $2.2 billion. I'm still, the governors are yet not yet open. Tell us, who are those who are even going to benefit from it? And I can bet a finger, most of the private companies will be their cronies. And I said, somebody said, if Nigeria is an honest place, today at AMCON, we have over 5.2 trillion naira toxic assets that are owed by less than 20 Nigerians. And most of them are prancing around as philanthropists. Most of them are governors. Most of them are public office holders. 5.2 trillion naira of taxpayers' money. Nobody's asking, how are we going to repay this money? And because people do all manner of nonsense and get away with it, there is no law, there are no consequences.
And that's why I was saying that in terms of the issue of taxation, because you were saying earlier that people don't pay, and I'm saying no excuses for those who don't pay. But perhaps is the accountability question that is the reason why some people like to evade tax. Criminal elements. But there are those who, is because of the accountability question of, what are you doing with my tax? I have not seen any development that is commensurate with what you're collecting. And so for them, until I begin to see that there is development, and then I can aid you with more funding. But until then some people will say, look, they are not going to pay tax.
See, all of us are collectively responsible for where Nigeria is today. We talk who is to hold who accountable. Let me tell you, 80% of the average Nigerian elite is always waiting on the wings to see if he will be able to invite to the table to share and continue the parade. If 80% of, even 60% of Nigerian elites are responsible, are compassionate, are accountable, have the fear of God, Nigeria will not be where it is today. We talk about electoral reform. We need to make election transparent. And I ask one simple question. We have 176,824 electoral polling booths. We have 8,809 electoral wards. I'll give you an example in Imo State in 2023, when we had the election in November. And people were saying all manner of, I said, it's not a case of ethnicity. It's a case of value set, mindset. What am I bringing to the table to help this country? Or what am I taking out of it? I said 99% of those who conducted election in Imo State are Igbo from Imo State. 305 electoral ward, over 4,000 polling booths. People, those who rewrote result at the polling booths, at the ward collection center, at local government collection center, are people from the same states. If people can sit down and say, I'm not going to be part of this wickedness, in my own private corner, I'm going to do what is right. And we have 60% of us saying that this country, everybody will be accountable. I'm a Christian. There was a time in Babylon when the Jews were taken into captivity. Professors, governors, leaders, and everybody compromised and became part of the system. There were only 4 young men, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They said, they are not going to be part of the nonsense. Even to the point of death, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will not. It was their stand that made the king say, these ones are different. Because of what they've done, everybody, we are going to follow their character. We are going to follow their God. If truly 99% of Nigerians are either Muslims and Christians, we go to church every Sunday, we go to mosque every Friday. If truly we are living the values of Muhammad and Jesus Christ, this country will not be where it is today. So who is holding who accountable? First of all, you need to hold yourself accountable as an individual. In the morning, stand before the mirror, ask yourself, what value am I bringing to myself and to this country? Am I part of the road? Am I part of the solution? If 60% of us can sincerely stand for what is right, do what is right, be productive, everyone will become accountable. We need to look into the mirror individually and collectively before we blame anybody.
Now, for a lot of Nigerians who have been following this conversation on the tax regime and the tax reform bill, for them is how does this trickle down? I mean, that's the big question for them. You know, again, it's almost like the budget question when budgets are being presented and people are wondering, okay, big numbers, what does it mean for me? And so for people who are looking at these figures, 50%, 20%, 30%, and are wondering, what does this mean for me? What does it mean for the average Nigerian? How does it trickle down?
How it trickles down is very simple. If there is less corporate tax, companies will have more incentives to come and set up within your domain.
But there is no less corporate company income tax.
But that is what under the tax program, it was supposed to be less.
The governors have said, keep it the way it is.
And I said, Mr. President and Taiwo Oyelede team and National Assembly must stick to VAT reduction. You see, let me tell you, the governors are not. I'm sorry to say, the governors are not thinking legacy. What they are thinking is that, how much am I getting? Nobody's asking, how much am I bringing to the table? There's an Igbo adage that says a goat that is owned communally sometimes offers parturition in tetas. People should be asking, what are we bringing? Let me tell you, when you look at an issue from the point of view of what value am I bringing, your thinking will be different from those that are thinking, what can I grab? All the governors are thinking, what they can grab. And it's not making sense. I give you an example now. Where I come from, Imo State, we have 305 electoral ward. As governor, I will show you how I will generate 5 to 10 billion naira from every of those wards and how I can create 1,000 jobs. If I have 1,000 people in every ward in my state earning 1 million naira or 2 million every year, and I'm taking 10% tax from them, more money will come to the table. More jobs will be created. People will have a higher living standard. And when people are employed, there will be no incentive for them to go and live in the bush as unknown gunmen and like animals. 3 reasons why we have insecurity in Nigeria. 1, economic inequalities. People are poor. Lack of education. Go and check the top 10 biggest economies in the whole world. The top 10 most secured countries in the whole world. They have literacy level of 98%. How come UAE, 100% Islam, they are not the same thing like Pakistan or Yemen or Afghanistan? Because they have literacy level of 98%. What did China and Singapore do different from what Nigeria is doing today? In 1965, go and check history, Singapore literacy level was 57%, China was 61%. In 2005, 1980, China decided that they want to go on a massive education program. By 2005, they moved the literacy level to 97%. Today, look at where China is. Look at Singapore. Singapore has the 4th biggest GDP per capita because they train their people. If today we decide, okay, we want to amend, and this is what they should be doing, I expect the governors and legislation, we are going to amend the constitution. Education, in every of our borrowings and revenues, we must invest 25% on education. Nobody will be able to manipulate it. And then we are going to be paying, minimum you pay any teacher from primary to university level is 500,000 naira. When you do it, the smartest of us will go into the classroom. The brightest of us will go into the classroom. The brightest of us will go into the medical profession. Go and check the developed economies. The smartest go into pure sciences, STEM. The second smartest go into applied sciences, medicine and pharmacy. In Nigeria, the smartest go into applied sciences, and they have no value to add. If we decide today to reduce the number of out-of-school kids from 20 million to nothing in the next 12 years, we can do it. If we decide today that we want to build up if you build up literacy level in Nigeria to 98% in the next 12 years, I bet you, do you know, people in Bangladesh and the Philippines, they have some of the biggest business outsourcing program revenues than any other country. They train people and they export people. Our greatest export is our diasporas. When I hear people say, oh, Nigerians are migrating in droves, China deliberately allowed people to go and come back. If If we put the right incentives in place to make here secured.
And perhaps that is the difference between us and China.
And we train people and export them. They will come back.
The fact that people return to China, but people barely or hardly return to Nigeria. But I was again asking, you know,
because of insecurity.
Back to the issue of how it trickles down, and I really want us to talk about that so that Nigerians can begin. Because now, you know, whether it's a pyramid, whether it's a triangle, of all the stakeholders, we've only heard from two of the stakeholders, the federal government and the state government. The other part, which is the people, the local government has, I don't think they have even spoken.
Those are the slaves and the houseboys of the governors.
The governors supposed to be speaking for them. But the other part of that, I mean, probably is a pyramid then. The other part, which is the businesses, and then the citizens have they've not had a time to even chance to make their input. And so they're probably wondering, especially for those who are who are not the business owners, how does this trickle down? We're collecting more money now. There is equality, there is derivation, there is population. What does it mean for me, for those who are wondering?
What it actually means that, for example, if you look at that tax bill, that tax proposal, most Nigerians who are earning revenues of less than turnover of 50 million are not going to pay tax. It's a good incentive. It simply means that people are encouraged to migrate from that level to the higher level where they will start paying, because the more you earn, the more you pay. And if you look at, there are a lot of people at the lower rung that are not going to pay tax, which is good. In fact, like I said, taxation should be the more you earn, the more you pay. In fact, people should see it as a way of contributing to national development, as a way of contributing, just like you giving money to those who are less privileged. That is why an Elon could pay as much as $11 billion. I remember how Elon got to America. Elon wasn't born in the US. Elon was born in South Africa, went to Canada, then migrated to the US for his postgraduate. Today, look at the kind of values he's added. And then for entrepreneurs, we should be asking ourselves. I was listening to one of the clips by Steve Jobs when he was talking to his stakeholders. Steve Jobs, throughout that speech, never mentioned anything about revenue or money. He was talking about the values that Apple is going to bring to society. And I say to anybody who cares to listen, wherever you see problem, there is so much money. When you see men and people that have the mindset, we want to provide solutions, we want to add value to mankind, we want to solve this problem, they inadvertently makes wealth. One of the dollar billionaires in Nigeria that nobody can accuse of any blemish is Chinedu Echiro. Chinedu went to King's College, Lagos here, Onikon here. Chinedu went to Syracuse University. Chinedu migrated to US to go and do his master's at Harvard. One day at the tube station in New York, he missed his way. Chinedu began to think, if I am as smart as I am, I could miss my way at this. Another person. So how do I provide tech solutions so that people don't have the same problem? That was how he developed HubSpot. 10 years after, he sold it to Apple for $1 billion. He's in Ghana. He has most of his business in Ghana. Because here is not conducive. And that is the truth. So the governors should be thinking. Let me tell you, the problem is not actually, see, I said the governors are the most powerful people in Nigeria. The same way these governors have ganged up and said, okay, we want it. If the governors can come together, 24 of them, and say, okay, we want Nigeria restructured in a way that derivatives for every productivity will be 50%, so that people can look inward. We want Nigeria to be restructured in a way that every state will have seaports. 24 of them, honestly, together can meet Mr. President and convince him to buy into whatever progressive ideas that they share.
Perhaps what the president said to them, I think that was before, was it New Year or before the New Year, that it's in their hands. If I'm paraphrasing what he said, that it's all in their hands at that meeting he had with them.
The governors are the most powerful entity in Nigeria if they are very sincere. If 24 governors decide today that they want to adopt the 1963 Constitution, and they get their state assemblies buying, and legislators from their states in the National Assembly to buy into it, Mr. President will not do anything about it. And that is the truth, because they have the numbers. But the truth is that everybody is thinking politics. Everybody is playing politics. Desa Mumbakwe, Jokonde, and Dr. Michael Obara, even in their grace will be rolling. The difference between the governors then and the governors we have here is that those ones were not thinking about material things. Those ones were not thinking about acquisition. Those ones were not thinking about changing naira into dollar or pounds into dollar. Those ones were not thinking about looting. Those ones were thinking about the values they will add to humanity. Michael Obara, go and search everywhere. Amadu Bello, go and search everywhere. Obafemi Awolowo, go and search everywhere. We will not see anywhere where they stashed money in Maryland or in Cayman Island or in Mauritius. but their name still rings in immortality. And that is what people should be thinking about. Life is not about what you stuff in your pocket and what you put in your bank account. Life is the value you add. How many people will remember you and they will kneel down and say, God, thank you for this governor. You see the way we talk about Michael Obra, see the way we talk about Obafemi, see the way we invoke their names as if they are gods. Because they lived right and they served their people. This governor should be thinking, how do we serve our people? You can make all the money if you want to make the money by serving. I was talking to one governor in the South, I said, I ran the number, I said, even if you steal all the fuck and jack in your state, for 9 years, you will not make as much as Aliko Dangote makes in 1 year. So why do you always think about how to loot? Why not think about how you can increase the bakery, increase the bread, increase the cake, so that even if you're making 10% of the increased cake,
let's also point out before, so we don't run the risk of making a blanket statement on all governors. Some of them are doing very well, at least to an extent. There are some who are making in their states, well, some strides and level of development. Maybe the thinking should then go higher than where.
God bless you. I'm saying they are doing 49%, 50%. Why not do 90% like Joe Conde
higher? We do have to leave it there. We'll continue to see how this conversation plays out and how the National Assembly how quick the National Assembly will pass this bill. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure to have had this conversation with you. We've been speaking with Dr. Naimeka Obiariri, who is an investment banker and an economist. Thank you.